It's 1966. Above North Vietnam, the skies erupt in anger. American F-105 Thunder Chiefs scream towards Hanoi, bomb bay loaded with ordnance. And then, out of nowhere, a metal needle slashes across the clouds. Knife-thin wings, traveling at velocities the Americans had never witnessed before. The pilot is Chun Nyuk Sihu. His aircraft, the Mikoyan Gorevich MiG-21. In seconds, unguided rockets fire from the MiG's wing pylons, and F-105 simply vanishes in a fireball. The silver jet disappears, and American pilots are left stunned. This was the 7th of July, 1966, the day when the MiG-21 made its presence felt in the world. But then what happened? That is where this story becomes completely bonkers. Within the course of more than half a century, this simple Soviet fighter proved to be something no one could have expected. More than 11,000 were made, the largest number of supersonic aircraft ever produced. 60 nations, still flying today after 7 decades. Before we begin, subscribe and ring the notification bell for more incredible aviation stories. If you're liking this, hit that like button. How did the triangular-winged interceptor end up as the ultimate survivor of aviation? This is the tale of the MiG-21, and your mind will be blown. The MiG-21 did not pop out of nowhere. It was a product of hard-earned lessons carved in the contrails of earlier Soviet jets. The first was the MiG-15, which shocked the world in the skies above Korea. American flyers, accustomed to having victory handed to them on a silver platter, learned they were being surpassed by swept-wing interceptors, climbing higher and hitting harder than anything they'd ever known. The second was the MiG-17, faster and neater, but not yet supersonic. The MiG-19 finally broke the sound barrier, but was cranky and lethal. Soviet pilots called it a widowmaker. By the mid-1950s, Soviet engineers needed something revolutionary. The Cold War was heating up. American bombers grew larger and faster with each passing year. The Soviet Union needed an interceptor that could quickly climb, cruise at twice the speed of sound, and be simple enough to mass produce. The answer was in an unexpected place: the triangle. In the Mikoyan Design Bureau, Designer-in-Chief Artem Mikoyan pored over wind tunnel results. Delta wings, triangular in shape, held the promise of something better than swept wings. They could sustain high-speed stress, yet they would have superior climbing capabilities. The prototype YE-4 appeared in 1955. When it took to the skies on June 16th of that year, test pilots immediately recognized they had something special. The little fighter flew like a bullet, soaring at angles that defied physical possibility. But the world's first public showing was truly astounding to the world. During the 1956 Soviet Aviation Day flyover in Moscow, Western observers watched agog as formations of lean, triangular jets streaked across the sky. NATO intelligence experts were frantically scribbling notes. This wasn't just some new Soviet fighter. This was a revolution. The MiG-21 ideology was pure Soviet pragmatism. While American fighters grew increasingly more complicated and heavy, the MiG-21 embraced simplicity. It was never designed for long-range bomb delivery or escort duty. It had one job: climb fast, fly fast, and shoot down unwanted guests from Soviet airspace. By 1959, the MiG-21 had been introduced into service, though NATO would call it fishbed. Across the world, it earned vivid nicknames. It was merely balalaika for its triangular shape by Soviet pilots. In Poland, the pencil described its narrow fuselage. Vietnamese pilots would later label it the Silver Swallow. No matter what the name, the history of aviation was on the verge of being forever changed. If the MiG-21 was born in the USSR, it came to age in the sweltering Southeast Asian skies. The initial MiG-21s arrived in North Vietnam in April 1966, and they were deployed to the elite 921st Fighter Regiment. They were not your typical aircraft. They were the state-of-the-art fighters of the Vietnamese People's Air Force, flown by their top pilots. The Americans had been largely having a good time up to that point. Their titanic bombing missions were encountered by minimal opposition from ancient MiG-17s and some MiG-19s. All that changed with the MiG-21. Unlike the dogfights of World War II, with spinning airplanes, the MiG-21 was designed for something new: the ambush. Vietnamese ground controllers would track incoming American formations on radar and steer MiG-21s into perfect attack positions. The little fighters would accelerate from low levels, fire missiles, and be gone before Americans could even respond. It was employed for the first time on July 7, 1966, and was very effective. Pilots Chung Nyuk Siu and Nguyen Nhut Chow, flying their MiG-21s, spotted F-105 Thunder Chiefs targeting objectives near Hanoi. Chung Nyuk Siu strafed close-range, unguided rockets in the battle, securing the MiG-21's first air-to-air victory over a manned aircraft. But that was just the beginning. The MiG-21's small size made it very difficult to spot. American pilots nicknamed it the flying telephone pole. Its quick acceleration allowed it to pop in and out of dogfighting territory before enemy fighters could even respond. And its K-13 Atoll missiles, reverse-engineered from captured American sidewinders during raids by the enemy, were fairly lethal in the hands of experienced pilots. Vietnamese ace Nguyen Van Cock was the conflict's top-scoring MiG-21 pilot with 9 confirmed kills. Later in life, he would state, "The MiG-21 gave us speed and surprise. Against the heavy American jets, these were our greatest weapons." But the MiG-21 was far from invincible. Its delta wing, optimum for high-speed interception, dissipated energy very quickly in protracted turning dogfighting. Its short range required pilots to fight close to home bases at the expense of tactical flexibility. And the K-13 missiles, though reliable, were notorious for unreliability. In spite of this, the psychological impact was enormous. American strike groups began to release their bombs at the first sighting of MiG-21s, turning carefully planned missions into air free-for-alls. The tiny Vietnamese aircraft had demonstrated that superior technology and numbers didn't always lead to dominance in the air. And even as Vietnam burned in Southeast Asia, another battleground was soon to put the MiG-21's abilities to the test: the Middle East's seemingly endless deserts. The MiG-21's moment of glory should have been the Six-Day War of 1967. Arab air forces committed hundreds of Soviet MiG-21s to confront Israeli Mirages and Super Mystères. But instead of air-to-air combat, the war started with one of the greatest surprise attacks in military history. Israeli planes attacked Arab air bases early in the morning and destroyed hundreds of aircraft on the ground, including many brand-new MiG-21s that never had a chance to engage in combat. The MiG-21s that did get airborne were outmaneuvered and outnumbered. The Israeli pilots, who were operating French-built Mirages, had trained in air-to-air combat for many hours. The speeded-up war was concluded with Israel exercising complete air supremacy. But the story didn't quite end there. In the course of the war of attrition, something completely new happened. Soviet pilots began taking Egyptian MiG-21s into battle against Israeli forces. These were not advisors. These were active Soviet Air Force pilots with Russian radio chatter. The fights were intense and clandestine. In 1970, Operation Rimon, 20 Israeli pilots openly provoked Soviet-flown MiGs into a dogfight. The Israelis had studied the Soviets' tactics and set up the perfect ambush. Amid the battle, Israeli Phantoms shot down some MiG-21s, and Soviet pilots were killed. The events had the potential to escalate the Cold War. The 1973 Yom Kippur War restored popularity to the MiG-21. Syrian and Egyptian pilots, heavily trained now, posed a serious threat to Israeli air power. MiG-21s shot down sophisticated Israeli planes, proving that the Soviet fighter was still a match for any plane in skilled hands. But by 1982, When Israel invaded Lebanon, the technological advantage had become a chasm. Israeli F-15s and F-16s, equipped with sophisticated radar and long-range missiles, systemically shot down Syrian MiG-21s. The infamous Bekaa Valley turkey shoot found Israeli pilots shooting down over 80 Syrian aircraft, most of them MiG-21s, with few losses. The message was blunt. The MiG-21 days, as a frontline interceptor against Western technology, were gone. But while the MiG-21 was struggling for survival against sophisticated Western interceptors, it was being resurrected across the Third World. Ever since the 1960s, the Soviet Union used the MiG-21 as a tool of foreign policy. Post-independence African, Asian, and Latin American nations needed air forces, but not the expensive Western fighters. The MiG-21 offered the attractive alternative, a fraction of the cost for supersonic flight. Next, the distinctive triangular wings appeared in the air forces of the globe: Angola, Ethiopia, Uganda, Mozambique, Algeria, Syria, Iraq, India, Vietnam, North Korea, Cuba. The names just went on and on. For many of these nations, the MiG-21 was their first foray into the jet era. MiG-21 was actually well-suited for developing air forces. Its simple design permitted operation from grass airstrips with sparse ground facilities. Its rugged build allowed it to function in hostile environments, ranging from tropical humidity to sand deserts. And its uncomplicated systems allowed pilots to be trained relatively rapidly. The plane demonstrated its versatility in wars on various continents. It was used in the Iran-Iraq War, the Ethiopian-Somali Ogaden War, and several African civil wars. There were countless border incursions it fought. All these added to the MiG-21's combat record. More importantly, the MiG-21 was a symbol of national pride. For nations newly independent from colonialism, owning supersonic fighters was independence and empowerment. No country would be more associated with the MiG-21 than India. In 1962, as tensions with China and Pakistan were building, India purchased a contract to license-produce the fighter through Hindustan Aeronautics Limited. The first MiG-21 produced in India rolled off the assembly line in 1966, and production lasted more than 40 years. Ultimately, over 1,200 MiG-21s would fly in Indian markings, the largest non-Soviet fleet. Indian MiG-21s saw long service in conflicts against Pakistan, winning victories and suffering losses in roughly equal numbers. During the 1971 war that birthed Bangladesh, Indian MiG-21s fought Pakistani F-104 starfighters and Chinese-made F-6s in brutal dogfighting. The compact Soviet planes became peers of Western supersonic planes. But by the 2000s, India's aging MiG-21 fleet had earned itself a gruesome nickname, the Flying Coffin. Decades of service, some in poor condition, yielded a series of crashes that took dozens of pilots' lives. But the aircraft kept flying, a tribute both to their value for Indian security and the challenge of retiring such a large fleet. China's experience with MiG-21 was more complex. The early 1960s, before the Sino-Soviet split, saw China receive technical assistance in order to produce its own copy, J-7. Once diplomacy turned ugly, China continued development on its own, eventually producing variants of which little to no resemblance existed to the Soviet original. The Chinese version for export of the F-7 turned out almost as successful as the original MiG-21. Pakistan, Bangladesh, Iran, a few African nations, and others flew the Chinese-manufactured versions. With Western-style avionics, improved weapon systems, and glass cockpits, the F-7 prolonged the life of the original MiG-21 design for a second time, well into the 21st century. What set the MiG-21 apart from other fighters of its era? Why did it last when airplanes of its era were parked in museums? The answer lies in a near-perfect storm of practical factors that made this Soviet fighter nearly irreplaceable. It came first in its brutal simplicity. Whereas Western pilots were becoming ever more complex, with specialized facilities and skilled technicians needed to support them, the MiG-21 could be repaired in a muddy field using simple equipment. Its systems were uncomplicated, its parts fairly cheap, and its maintenance procedures could be mastered by minimally trained technicians. Second was its incredible versatility. The plain MiG-21 airframe could accept new technology like a chameleon changes color. Russian, Israeli, and Romanian upgrade schemes turned the 1960s fighters into 21st century warriors. A MiG-21 that came off the production line in the Kennedy era could be upgraded in the Obama era to fire sophisticated missiles and fight alongside next-generation aircraft. Third was plain economics. For cash-strapped air forces, it was infinitely cheaper to have MiG-21s flying than to buy new planes. Even with costly upgrades, the total cost was a fraction of what a state-of-the-art fighter entailed. Finally, there was a brute production quantity. With over 11,000 made, spare parts remained out there for decades since the last jet rolled off the production line. The global MiG-21 fraternity established a support infrastructure of suppliers and maintenance facilities that kept the type airborne around the world. The MiG-21 didn't merely defend airspace. It leveled the playing field for air power. It enabled small nations to introduce supersonic fighters. It demonstrated that the best solution isn't always the most expensive one. And here we are, in 2025, telling the story of a fighter that first flew when Eisenhower was president. The MiG-21 has outlived the Soviet Union that created it. It has outlasted the Cold War that birthed it. Today, while engineers design sixth-generation fighters with AI co-pilots, somewhere in the world, a pilot is still strapping into a MiG-21. India just retired its last MiG-21 after 6 decades. North Korea still scrambles them to intercept foreign aircraft. Across Africa and Asia, upgraded MiG-21s continue their eternal patrol. New upgrade kits transformed Kennedy-era MiG-21s into fighters capable of dancing with 21st century aircraft. Digital gauges replace steam gauges. Modern radars track targets that the original designers never dreamed of. From its first combat victory over Vietnam to its continued service today, the MiG-21 has been all of those things. A Soviet propaganda icon, a symbol of resistance, a technological wonder, a maintenance nightmare. But above all, it has been a survivor. The fastest volume supersonic fighter ever produced, the aircraft that refused to die, a Cold War-conceived silver needle that was adopted as a symbol around the globe. This has been the story of the MiG-21, and incredibly, it's still being written. If that blew you away, hit the like button. Subscribe for more jaw-dropping aviation stories. Share this with other aviation enthusiasts. And let me know in the comments what legendary aircraft you'd like us to cover next. There are tales in the skies just waiting to be told.